welcome to another video here on the Critical Focus channel. First off, a big shout out to all my members who support my work and keeps the paint flowing and the electricity running. Members do get access to the member Discord, will influence the content, the matchups, whatnot. There is a join button below if you feel so inclined. But regardless, I am happy for your support in the form of actually just watching the video, of a like and a comment, and if you haven't already, please do feel free to subscribe as well. And if you are looking to buy Warhammer merch, there is an affiliate link in the video description as well. Let's get on with the video. Okay people, it's time to review the Order Warbands from the Grand Alliance boxes, kindly sent to me as preview samples by Games Workshop, which I may have failed to mention in the Destruction and Chaos Ditto reviews, so sorry about that. This time we will review the Order box named Hunters and Heroes, and we are going to start off with Myari's Purifiers. Hailing from the Dire Chasm start box, this Lumineth Realm Lord's Warband was a sort of hold flex type warband previously, but they certainly didn't lack counter punch either. Quite strong defensively, with their big glaring weakness being the low overall wound tally, with all fighters sporting 3 wounds in a 4-man warband. So let's look at their new fighter cards and see what they have cooked up. We see 4 move across the board, except for the more stoic Alarith Stone Guard Bahanar, so that's unchanged basically. Defensively, they all start on a single defense die, so quite the nerf there, with Bahanar losing a shield and Myari dropping to a single dodge. However, with 3 extra wounds total across the board, with everyone except Senela going to 4 wounds. She can rain death from range 4, however, so you needn't commit too hard with her. Senela's frailer nature and less impact on the DPS output is reflected on her being only 1 bounty, while the other fighters are all 2. Attack-wise, Myari himself keeps his inaccurate range 2 attack with 1 hammer 2 damage, but that also means he is one of a very few fighters that pack 2 damage on that range uninspired. I'll get back to why it may be just a single hammer. His old magic attack has been made into a range 3 2 hammer 1 damage attack, otherwise nothing really stands out here other than maybe the range 4 from Senela's Bowharp, which has kept the range from the first edition, and the fact that she now has a, albeit an inaccurate one, range 1 attack as well, representing that Venari dagger upgrade, I guess, which was way more awesome, mind you. So let's flip them over. Nothing really happens with the move, and the only defensive buff we see is the 2 shields from Bahanar here, which is a bit concerning up front at least, as that 1 dodge for Myari does not look very sexy. Eileen used to also pick up a second shield and Senela a second dodge. This is likely an offset for the extra wounds across the board, but also for some at least of the effects of the war scrolls, so yeah, stay tuned. Myari picks up a second hammer in his range 2 and switches to 4 swords in his ranged option. Eileen picks up a 3rd hammer and cleave. Senela 5 range on her harp bow. Bahanar picks up Grievous on both his range 1 and range 2, so that comes out to 3 damage up front and 2 damage from his range 2 option. Let's evaluate it after having looked at the war scroll, I guess. So I'm happy to see that the Aether Quartz mechanic has sticked around and is still here, and it works pretty much like before, at least up front. So if a fighter has a counter and they all start with 1, they can use the Heightened Senses search ability after they made an attack or save roll. They can dump the token to re-roll 1 dice in that roll, and that of course ties into the Inspire that works similar to before. You inspire a fighter after making an attack or save roll with only successes, which is sort of the implied reason for Myari's 1 hammer attack. It's fairly easy to roll only successes if you roll 1 hammer. Do note the attack or save roll does not need to succeed, it just needs to have all successful results. So that's also something to keep in mind when you're defending with shields versus cleave, for example, so do note that that means that shields are not successes even if they normally would be. Then rather than the typical once per game abilities seen on other war scrolls, each of the fighters instead gets different buffs if they still have their token around. First up, Myari will have +1 save for the turn if he has a token at the start of a turn. So essentially this means that Myari still is 2 dodge, but if you use the Aether Quartz to re-roll a save or attack roll, you will lose that +1 save. I'm not crazy about this honestly, since I really think that he should have 2 dodge anyway without extra fancy mechanics to make up for it. Do note that the turn is an action step plus a power step, so even if you burn your token in the action step, you'll still keep that extra +1 save until the power step ends for any potential extra attacks or save rolls made in out of sequence, I guess. Next up is Enduring Rock for Banner, which means that while he has his token around, he cannot be pushed by enemies' abilities, which is pretty decent actually, and sort of a much stronger version than his old no drive back while unmoved or uncharged. But at the same time, it also requires you to not burn your token. Impeccable Aim for Sanela gives her Brutal and Ensnare while tokened up. Pretty meh, honestly. I've so far found Brutal to be the least valuable effect on weapons. Sanela will really miss her old Crit Grievous on the shorter range option on the bow there. Masterful Strike finally for Eileen means that she will flank her enemies while tokened up, which is pretty neat, especially inspired on 3 hammers with Cleave. Okay, I honestly feel that this is pretty meh for Myaris. Most other warbands gets cool ping abilities, pushes, and out of sequence moves, etc. Myaris gets a bunch of buffs they pretty much had on their fighter cards before, and some extra wounds of course, and in some cases the tokened up abilities don't even reflect their full power in the previous version of the game. I do feel initially at least that this War Scroll direly misses some tech. Stat wise they look pretty good, they look okay, but are left behind with all the cool stuff most other warbands get. So yeah, let's move on to our second warband here. Our next warband here is Hexbane's Hunters. At this point my voice is starting to crack up because I've done so many of these, so yeah, bear with me. Certainly a favorite of mine, the Hexbane's Hunters, so I have a special kind of hope that they do retain some of their fun shenanigans, and I can say up front that I know that they do because I've already played them and they are great fun. So let's check the fighter cards of this Nethermace warband branded as Strike. First up we have 3 basic move on all of the humans, who are no longer hunters by the way, they are Agents Azurite. Fancy pansy, eh? And that little symbol on their fighter cards tells you just that. The dogs do have their own symbols with the minion keyword, and they sport a more respectable 4 move. Nothing has changed with the fighter's wounds or health rather. Hexbane and Amos is still 3, while all other fighters, including the dogs, are 2. You will also note that Hexbane and Amos has a bounty of 2, while the other humans have 1 and the dog 0, so that adds up to 6, but I'll explain why later. And yeah, defensively they seem to be unchanged as well, with Pock retaining his vital 2 block there, especially on only 2 wounds. Damage has been nerfed here. Bridget is doing a single damage up close and personal, but do at least have Crit Grievous. Crit Grievous also goes for the Torch of Haskell. The saddest part is that Pock no longer has his old 2 damage ranged attack that was a once per round, so he now has a more vanilla profile with 3 range, 2 hammers, 1 damage. Let's turn the fighter cards over. Inspired, the move remains unchanged on all fighters, but Bridget and the dogs picks up their second dodge. Haskell's range 1 gets a significant boost, going from 3 to 4 swords and swapping Crit Grievous for 2 damage flat, which means you can then instead slap on Grievous via, for example, Great Strength to have a really accurate 3 damage attack on him. Amos, the Grumpy Woodcutter, goes to a very accurate 3 hammer attack on 2 damage, and Bridget also loses that Crit Grievous for 2 damage flat instead. Pock picks up an extra hammer and ensnare, but still feels like a sad version of his former self, and the dogs gets a bit more accurately, just like before, on those 3 swords. I particularly like that we get to lose the Crit Grievous for increased damage on a couple of fighters, because this warband certainly needs ways of finding that 3 damage to really work as an aggro team in most cases. So let's check out the War Scrolls. The layout is quite different here with no sidebar, but yeah, let's just read it from top to bottom. After an Agent Azurite, previous hunter that is slain, you can inspire another agent. After a friendly Pock specifically is slain, inspire each minion. So this is interesting. So this sort of means that you can be pretty ballsy and offensive with Pock, given that he is now not that valuable anymore, losing his once per round 2 damage ranged attack, and if you try to find his early demise, he will not only inspire another agent, but also the 2 dogs. And getting both dogs to that 2 dodge is pretty important, as they still are the sort of assist bots that they were previously, and also now can hold treasure tokens, as beasts aren't really a thing anymore. So overall, the simplified inspire here is nice actually. Then let's check the rest of the card out. Tools of the Trade says that you can add the total bounty of slain agents to your glory total for purposes for determining available glory on upgrades. This is a moot point late game, but it's pretty handy early game, especially if you get kind of a rough start, to slap on some early oomph on your remaining agents. Marked for Vengeance is actually a pretty cool new mechanic, and it tells us that when an agent is slain, the attacker is marked and will remain so until that fighter dies. And mechanically, that means you will get an attack reroll versus that fighter, and when you finally and hopefully kill that fighter, you can then remove all charge and move tokens from a friendly fighter, not the one doing the attack necessarily, and that also includes the dogs, as freeing up their move is more vital now, but more on that in a sec. I love the thematic design here with the Vengeance and the extra rerolls. This is awesome. The reroll will stack with any staggered tokens on enemy fights as well, so you could be quite accurate here with double rerolls and possibly support from dogs. It's not extremely strong, but it just encourages you to have those little vendettas in your games. Tight-knit pack means that when the first dog, minion, is slain, you add 1 bounty to the surviving one. So there you have your 7 glory total. Not much to say there. Seems like a smooth solution to the 7 bounty total for me. Loyal Hounds is then the revamped and quite nerfed dog reaction. So yeah, when an agent moves, or charges for that matter, you can also move a dog as a reaction to that agent moving. But now it does not work if the dog has a charger move previously. So you can't spam that assist like before, but it's still quite strong, and I'm glad it's just still there, I guess. And lastly, we have Wards of Martyr's Blood, which means that you can deny weapon abilities for incoming attacks once per game. Given that this can take away Grievous, which will be your most important effect to remove, this sort of reads like the old by hook or by crook ploy reaction that reduced incoming damage by 1 if you had an upgrade on the defender. Okay, so I'm actually really happy with the overall design here. They won't be top of the meta, but they will still be able to pull off their fun tricks and challenge some big hitters from time to time. And they keep a lot of their flavor while streamlining the cumbersome individual inspires. I'll also have you know that we have recorded a game with them, and we had great fun with the pairing here with Ephelim in that game, so look out for that game as well. So let's move on to the next warband here. Our next one is a very vintage warband here, and another warband tagged strike, the Sylvaneth warband Ylthari's Guardians from the Nightfall season. Let's check them out. Being elves, they all sport 4 move on mostly 1 defense, bar Ylthari, who is cracking up 2 dodge. Galangan has at least uninspired lost his previous 2 shields, but we've seen an increase in wounds on both Skithale and Anslain. Bounty-wise, we continue the trend with a ranged weaker fighter being 1, while the other 2. Everyone except the archer can dish out 2 damage on fairly accurate elf-like attacks, and Anslain has also been given a ranged 1 option, although pretty weak. Not much to talk about here. Let's flip them over. We see Galangan pick up his old 2 shields here and gain brutal on his range 1 attack, which is sort of meh of an effect. Ylthari looking accurate there with 3 hammers, 2 damage, but on 3 wounds. He'll be pretty frail as a frontliner. Skithale gains ensnare on 3 accurate hammers, while Anslain gains an extra range on her bow. Given the heavier melee focus on Ylthari himself, I would have preferred Ylthari and Anslain swap their wounds around, but you can't have everything, I guess. No Grievous effects, but as a strike warband, it'll be a staple upgrade in our deck at least, and we have actually another fun way of buffing the damage with this warband. I'm not gonna hold you in suspense anymore, let's check the war scroll out. So the Inspire is rather lengthy and complicated, but very thematic, so this will take some time. Each time a friendly fighter uses a core ability, not necessarily then in an action step, because you could do a move as an out-of-sequence thing from a ploy or a reaction from an upgrade or what have you. If you do that, anyway, if you do a core ability with a friendly fighter, you can place 1 power card from your hand or your power deck. Ideally, you will always want to do it from your power deck. You can place that power card face down next to this war scroll to a maximum of 3. And then at the end of your turn, and after an enemy fighter is slain, that means slain by a pin card, by an attack, whatever. Just slain. Or if they kill them themselves, it still happens. You place 1 growth token on each of those face down cards. And once a single card has 5 tokens, you pick a friendly fighter and inspire them, and then you remove the growth tokens from that card and add that card to your hand. I've not yet played Ylthari myself, but I have sidelined the game with them, and this card draw is really good, and getting to those 5 tokens and inspiring fighters is quite fast. And I mean, this little side game is very thematic and fun. sort of like cultivating in an MMO. Then we have the abilities, and we may use only one of the following abilities, but we might use them once per phase. So even if you've used one ability, you may still use it again in the next one, but you can't use more than one of these abilities once per phase. It is a sort of confusing wording there, but I have it on good authority that is how it works. First up, the burgeoning, where we push a friendly fighter off your action step. X hexes, where X is the number of slain friendly fighters. If there are no slain friendly fighters, we may still push one. Very good. Even pushing one can be very crucial at times. The reaping means we get plus X attack dice in an attack, where X is the number of slain friendly fighters. Also very decent. And in a pinch, just like the last one, we still get to have that +1 if we have no slain friendly fighters. The dwindling means that you can react to your action step to pick a friendly fighter and remove them from the battlefield and place them in an empty hex adjacent to another friendly fighter. That's pretty awesome. Set up support, scoot away from a dangerous position, what have you. Lastly, Everdusk, which to my knowledge is the only way of getting extra damage in this game right now, except for Grievous. It means we get plus X damage in an attack, where X is, you guessed it, the number of slain friendly fighters. This, however, does not work if we have no slain friendly fighters, so you won't get that baseline +1. Regardless, you need a slain fighter to use it, but that's gonna happen. I mean, let's face it, that's really cool. So I think they nailed the mechanic with this warband. Both side game here with the growth tokens and the vengeful natures of these revenant spirits getting stronger as friendly fighters are slain. Absolutely love the design here. Ylthari was a warband that was pretty much unplayable without a very heavy side order of universal cards before, so not much of the warband flavor was retained anyway, and now they've gained a lot flavor, I would argue. I love them and I can't wait to play them myself. Let's look at our last warband in this box. Our fourth and final warband in this box is another Nightvault warband, the Caradon Overlords warband, Thundrik's Profiteers. They've never really been very strong, but have been a favorite of many people, and the models are pretty awesome. This is another warband that at best took like 5-6 cards of their own in build formats towards the end of the first edition. They basically had maybe 1 or 2 searches that you could score, so no real warband flavor to speak of. So let's see how they look now in Embergard. They're tagged Mastery, by the way, which is sort of a non-tag really. Mastery mostly seems like we don't really know what this warband is supposed to do, so let's chuck them in the Mastery category. They all sport a stunty move of 2, except Balloon Man, who is on 4, so Balloon Man is Kaskan, of course. They also start on 1 defense, all of them on shields, except the Nimble Assassin, I guess, Garrod, who settles for 1 dodge. Initially at least. Wounds-wise, we have the leader on 4 and the rest on 3, which is initially a bit of a boost, as neither Garrod or Enric had more than 2 uninspired previously, but the entire warband picked up an extra health, each inspired, which I can spoil already now that I don't anymore. Bounty-wise, we have the leader and Balloon Man on 2, the rest on 1. We've seen an expected ranged damage nerf here, with Lund's old 2 damage attack being a thing of the past, and neither does the leader gain any damage inspired either. Lund does get an extra range as a consolation prize though. In melee, the leader, Kaskan and Garrod can all dish out a fairly accurate 2 damage, and all of the fighters obviously have ranged options. On the flip side, all the non-flying dwarfs picks up an extra vital move, while Kaskan stays on 4 and Thundrik gains a second shield. He also gains cleave on both his attacks, while Balloon Man goes to 3 damage without the need of Grievous in his range 1 attack, so that could potentially be a Giant Slayer with a Grievous slapped onto it, but he is just 3 wounds on single defense die, so as a frontliner he sorely misses his old 4th inspired wound. Lund gets more accurate with 4 whooping hammers, and so does Enric with stagger to boot there. So for the purposes of simply landing successful ranged attacks to score potential objectives, they'll be doing a cracking job at that, literally. Garrod gets nothing more than the extra move and the change to shield, a poor guy. Let's check the War Scroll. They inspire just like before, with each time you score an objective card, your leader, if he is alive, may promote one of your fighters to be inspired, and he may of course choose to inspire himself as well. This inspire goes for both search objectives and objectives scored in the end phase, so this should, given the easier objectives now, be a pretty quick affair, which is a good thing given the minuscule move we sport. This is mine, fair and square, means that if we hold a treasure token, we can't be pushed by enemies' abilities if we have no adjacent enemy fighters. situationally sort of decent and thematic at least. Let's look at the abilities. The leader gets to keep his old trick with atmospheric isolation, reacting to his activation to make hexes adjacent to him into essentially a minefield. I could just say lethal hexes, and yeah, I just did, since that's how they work, but that's not a thing anymore, so for any people coming into the hobby in this season, I might as well explain it fully. So, if an enemy fighter moves into, are placed in, or is pushed into a hex adjacent to him, they take 1 damage. This effect lasts until the end of the following action step, and he can do this every time he activates, which is a nice deterrent if you're facing some pesky range 1 fighters sizing up your leader. Shoot them in the face, drive them away, and make charging you a dangerous prospect. This is something he can use every time he activates, by the way. Then we have the once per game abilities. First up, custom Aether Shot rounds for +1 attack dice and +1 range on a single ranged attack. And neat, but we sort of already have enough accuracy, I would argue, and range as well, with 2 of the fighters being on 4 hammers and everyone having range 3 already, and Lund being on range 4 as well. So it feels sort of redundant. Halo Aether Shot means we can shoot an additional target within 2 hexes of the first one. We still need to have a range to that second fighter, mind you, and this is only usable if we have no move and or charge tokens. I think the move and charge token restriction there is a bit unnecessary, honestly. Their ranged attacks aren't that strong anyway, and there is no way of, like, getting +1 damage on these range attacks. Lastly, we have Buy the Code, where we can push a friendly fighter 3 hexes to end up on a feature token. I guess they stole that one from the Fire Slayers, but I'll take it, I guess. Definitely the best once per game out of these. Okay, so strong Inspire, but they gain, I guess, too little from Inspiring. They don't get the extra previous wound, they don't get that buffed ranged damage on the leader. I would have liked to see the leader at least pick up like crit Grievous on his ranged attack. These are supposed to be heavy blunderbusses, muskets and dwarven weaponry, and it should reflect on their fighter cards, rather than just being sort of like any poorly constructed git shooter. I'm not totally sold on them, to be honest, but I'll still try them out and see how they fare in practice. So yeah, that is it for the order box, and I've now only got 1 left to review, but I will probably just release all of them at the same time anyway, so make sure to check them all out to get up to speed on all of these 60 new teams, as well as the Jaws of Itzel, the Grandfather's Gardeners, and the 2 new rival decks as well. Wow, I'm gonna take some serious rest and recovery after having done all these reviews. So yes, stay tuned and leave a comment on the video, comment on your favorite warband of the bunch. Have a great rest of your day, take care.